All right, everyone, we will start in a few minutes. I will try my best to project my voice, and hopefully, this microphone will work for all of you watching online, either live on the replay. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, we're sort of making
We'll be starting soon. I'm just waiting on some people to get their coffees, and we'll begin shortly. Meanwhile, share the link with all your friends and family. Yeah.
I remember Jessica or Andre said he came to visit you guys, right?
Yeah, they did. And you live in Lynden, right?
Yeah.
Your family. Yeah.
Oh,
All right, well, we're going to get started here this morning. Thank you for coming in. Have fun at the storyboard event. So I'm Cootsie Jobs, and my husband and I, Justin, own Eucatastrophe, and we're just really excited to have Monica Connolly here. This is our second author event, and we hope the second of many more. But we feel especially blessed here to have Monica living in our community and sharing her story of hope and resilience and faith. And we just met pretty recently and had a talk, and to be honest, we're just trusting the Lord for bringing these stories and these books into our path. And I don't even know, somebody must have tagged me on Facebook or something. Do you know how?
I emailed you.
Oh, you emailed me. Did somebody somebody must have told you about me, though.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyways, without further ado, I'd just like to welcome Monica Connolly.
Thank you. All right, thank you everyone for coming. So I'm here to talk to you about my book. I'm a survivor of the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, earthquake and tsunami. This is the deadliest tsunami in history still, and the Indian Ocean tsunami and earthquake is often featured in the top 10 natural disasters of the world. The earthquake that originated it was between 9.1 and 9.3 in the Richter scale. It was just off the coast of Indonesia, and at the time I was vacationing in Thailand with my parents, and we were at the beach when the wave struck, and that's exactly where the book starts. I start right at the action. So this is a survival story, but it's also my testimony. And in preparing for this event, I was wondering what I should talk about, because there's just so much. That's why I wrote a book. And I thought I would talk about 3 key moments in the book, because after the tsunami, during my darkest years mentally, these were the moments that I returned to constantly, and that really helped me. So if you take nothing else out of this event, I hope that you at least listen to my stories, to these 3 key moments, and hopefully it will help you in your own struggles. The first moment I want to talk to you about is when I am dying. I'll start right there. I had been underwater for the longest time. My whole body is in pain. I can feel every cell in my body working to keep me alive. And this thought just comes to mind, that of my mother telling me stories of people near death, and how, getting emotional already, how an angel would appear and offer them a choice between life and death. So addressing this presence, because I could feel there was this presence just guiding me, guiding my thoughts, and it had helped me up until this point, and I could just feel it there waiting, just watching and waiting. And this is the first time that I think of it consciously, and I address it and I ask it, well, isn't it time that you offer me that choice? A little bit arrogant on my part. I was like, well, and it does. It shows me what that would be like for me. And I felt my pain go away, this immense pain just kept getting worse. Suddenly it was gone. And I felt peace, like overwhelming, transcending peace. And it just really felt like returning back home. So I knew what death would be like for me, and it felt good and it was good. But it didn't offer me anything about life. It just said, you can go home basically, or you can live. But there was no images or feelings of what life would be for me or could be like for me. And then so I started thinking about what my life had been up until that point. I was only 13, so my life just revolved around school. I'll go to school, study, go back home, do my homework, get good grades. That was it. But I had plans. I had lots of plans for the future. And out of all of those plans, really I only wanted 2 things out of life. I wanted to know true love, and I wanted to know that when I did go home, I went knowing that my work here, because it felt like life was just going to work. and dying was going back home. So I wanted to feel like my work mattered, like I had done something, even if no one knew my name or what I had done, I would. And I just wanted to feel like my life had mattered, that I had made an impact, however small. So I couldn't die yet, and death was a guarantee. I knew it was good, so I didn't have to fear it, but life, it was so fleeting. It wasn't a certainty. So I told this voice, this presence, I told it I want to live. I choose life. And as soon as I make my choice, in that very instant, I reach surface. When I reach the surface, however, I black out, because that's what happens when you're not breathing for a very long period of time. You pass out. So very lucky that I passed out at the surface, because if I had passed out underwater, I would have probably drowned. I passed out, and I am woken up at this presence again. It's holding me by the shoulder so that I don't sink, and it shakes me gently, and it says in my mind, wake up. And I want to tell you, these hands holding me by my shoulders, they felt just like a real person, but there was no one there. It was just this, I call it presence. And it tells me to call out for God, and then it disappears, and I feel alone for the first time in my life. I was alone physically, but also spiritually. And that void, it told me that this present, this something, had always been with me throughout my whole life. And now it was not. But it left telling me to call out for God. And at first I felt really embarrassed, ashamed, ridiculous to call out to God. But I told myself, this voice that has helped you throughout this whole time, never steered you astray. If it tells you to call out for God, you call out for God. Like, really, what do you have to lose at this point? I was completely alone. There was no one there. So I call out for God. And as soon as I start calling out for God, it's very simple. I just say, God, help me, save me. Little did I know what those words should mean. Save me. And as soon as I say, like, I feel the emotion, I feel even surprised at how much I mean those words. I truly wanted to be saved. I wanted God to help me, only He could. And as soon as I do, before I start crying, because I can feel my eyes watering like I'm about to cry, but even before the first tear shed, I look to my left and I see this wire between two trees. And it's like it's shining, like being highlighted to me, shining. And as I reach for it, because it's at the perfect distance and height for me to grab onto it, as I reach for it, the word salvation echoes in my mind. And I didn't know what this truly meant at the time. I was just thinking physical salvation, but it's so much more than that. And from that point on, things just start working out so that I do live and that I am saved. Fast forwarding a lot that happens in between. The next moment I want to tell you about is perhaps the most impactful one for me. At this point, I'm already in the mountains, because that's what you do when a tsunami comes, you run to high ground. So I'm in the mountains, and I climb as high as I can possibly climb, because my body is exhausted at this point, but with all my energy, I just keep going up, because as soon as I reached the mountains, there were people right there on the bottom, and that didn't feel safe for me. So I made the decision, I'm not going to start climbing until I reach the highest group of people. So that's what I did to finally turn off those instinct, like inner alarms that I wasn't safe. So when I reach this group of people, I finally feel safe, because I'm so high. I can see through the trees, the beach, and everything looks so small and insignificant, even though it's the deadliest, biggest tsunami in history. And from my point of view, I can look down and I see this father reunite with his daughter. And can you imagine thinking that you lost your daughter? And then you find her right there. I felt so privileged to witness that moment, to see the love and relief on his father's face, to see their embrace, to see him have his little girl back in his arms. It moved me so much to a point where I thought to myself, all the pain and suffering I've experienced up until now, my choice to live, it was worth it just so I could witness this. Everything is worth it for this moment. But more than that, I thought, I would take even more suffering and pain. I would take upon myself all the pain and suffering of the whole world if that's what it took for this father and daughter to remain together. And that's when it dawned on me. That's what Jesus did. But it wasn't just for one father and daughter, it was for all of us. So I was just getting a glimpse of what that true love is like. This was my first lesson in true love. I had asked to live so that I would know true love, and then right there on the mountains, God shows me the love of Jesus. This selfless, incredible love. And now I feel it inside me too. And this is something that's actually not on the book, but up until that moment, I felt like I was living in this beautiful garden because my life was perfect, but I was like inside a glass box. I knew my parents loved me, but there was something just, I could feel there was more. There was something just keeping me from experiencing its fullness. And that's the moment that the glass shattered. And now I felt it in me. And now I understood all those people that I came across that were running towards the beach instead of away. Now I understood why they were going towards the beach, towards danger, to save other people. When just moments before I could not. I was just thinking, why? Why are you going towards the beach? Just run away and take me with you. And this, if you're Christian, this is the Holy Spirit. And it just changed my life forever. Yeah, so my years after the tsunami, they weren't always pleasant. They were very hard, and these were the things that I held on to. When in doubt, go back to the beginning, and this was my beginning. This is the day that I was born again. And in the middle of chaos, all I could see was love. And I came back there 10 years later to the 10th anniversary of the tsunami, and again I experienced peace. And my purpose in telling you all of this is that if you feel like maybe in your life you're drowning or you're going through your own tsunamis in life, just call out for God, because He will come and He will save you, and He will absolutely transform your life. If He did this for me, if He could transform this deadliest tsunami in history into what I believe is a powerful testimony of His love, then what can He do for you too? There's nothing He can't transform. And even my parents, He did not take from me, because that's something that the Lord brought to me recently. I remembered when I was a little girl and I was crossing the street and I was carrying this piece of bread. It's Portuguese and we call it God's bread, ironically. God's bread. And when I was crossing, I saw this hand, a giant hand in the spirit world, but in the physical world just went, and it just knocked it off of my hand. In the middle of the street, my mom was upset because I just got it. I didn't even take a bite out of it. My grandma starts laughing because she was there. She saw my surprised face. She just starts laughing. And I tell them, it wasn't me. It's not my fault that I dropped this. It was God. It's the hand of God. My mom just gives me a look like she believes me. And I often wonder, why would God knock this piece of bread out of my hand? Why would He do that? And then He pointed out what happened after that. Because I had lost this bread, my grandma, every day she would buy one of those breads for me. Even years later, she would still see it on the window and, oh, you remember when you were little and this happened? And it's like, yeah, and she would buy me one. So what he pointed out was, like a grandma who wants to feed you, how much more does God? So even my parents, this piece of bread, He did not take from me, because the Lord gave me dreams. And He told me that they are in heaven. So one day, we will be reunited. So what seemed like a terrible loss, He healed that too. My purpose with this book is to do what Psalms 118:17 says. I will not die but live and proclaim what the Lord has done. That's my mission here, is to proclaim what the Lord has done for me, what he can do for you too. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am open to any and all questions you may have. So,
I do have a question.
yeah.
First of all, thank you for sharing. That's just an amazing story, and I appreciate you with all the strangers sharing that. So, did your parents, or did you have a foundation for this before this event happened that brought you here, or was it?
So, yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to mention. Thank you for asking, because I forgot. I was not raised Christian at all. My father, he would say he's an atheist, then later he turned agnostic. He was raised Catholic. He absolutely hated church. He was always blaspheming the church and Jesus along with it. He just absolutely hated it. So I grew up with that version. And then my mother, she was spiritual but not religious. So Jesus to her was just a really good man who was misunderstood. And I was living at China at the time, so I had all the Eastern religions influenced much more than the Catholic. And I was calling myself a Buddhist. I had tried going to Catholic church at this point one time. I didn't like it at all. I just left saying my dad was right all along. So there was no reason for Jesus to come, to show up for me. And I struggled with the why Jesus question a lot throughout another 13 years, because it just didn't make sense. It wasn't how I was raised. It wasn't in the culture I was surrounded with. So that makes me believe that he's true. Yeah. There's this verse in the Bible that it's John 14:18, and it says, "I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you." And I know I read that, I started crying, because he did not leave me an orphan. He came for me over and over again until I finally came to him. Yeah.
So how did you end up in the United States?
So I met my husband in Ireland. That story is actually in the book, by the way. The story of how I met my husband is in the book. I was living in Portugal. He's living in Texas. We met in Ireland in a study abroad program for the summer with students from all over the world. And we just happened to pick the same study, the same dates, and that's where we met. And it was just really strong pull from the Lord. Because I wasn't very open to it at first. I didn't want a long distance relationship, and there was this thought that came to me, and it said, well, if you don't try, if you don't go for it, you'll never know what it could have been. And now, I would have been missing out on a great marriage with my kids. So it's the unknown attracts me, I guess. First life was the unknown, then my husband was the unknown. Even the U.S. was never in our plans. We weren't supposed to be in the U.S. It just happened that way. And it's all God.
Were there moments when you were writing the book that you questioned if it was the right decision as far as a healing process for you?
Yeah. I actually also talk about that struggle, because I struggle with the thought of who am I to talk about God? Who am I to talk about Jesus? Then there's some things I talk about of the years after the tsunami. I was like, I'm going to say these things. It's probably going to stir up some family drama. But I just felt it was important to tell my story, the full story, and just how dark those years were, even if it was with family. To show the contrast. I needed to show how dark it got before I found light again. Because it got to a point where I thought back, and I wished that on that day I had chosen death instead of life. So it got, to the darkest pit that it could get. But, those moments that I shared here, they just kept bringing me back.
Can you read us some of the book?
Okay. Which section would you like to hear?
The one that you feel the.
Okay, I can. I'm gonna read you when we first see the wave coming, and we are at the beach at this point, and I'm quite at a distance because I'm just trying to save fish that are flopping around everywhere. I'm trying to save them in these little puddles, and without thinking, I'm just going forward, like further away towards a tsunami. And then suddenly I hear a horrifying scream, a scream the likes of which I had never heard before, and yet it sounded so familiar. It was the kind that gives you shivers and puts your whole body in full alert. It was my name being called out. It was my mother. I had never heard her scream like that. I sprinted back, only now realizing how far I had walked. For a moment, I thought that was why she was calling me, that she was just overreacting as always whenever I got too far from her in other outings. At the same time, something told me it wasn't just that. When I got to her, I confirmed it. She barely acknowledged I was there, barely looked at me. There was not even a reprimand for being too far away, which was odd. Why was she so busy putting our stuff back in the bags, I wondered. And what was she looking at? Her gaze was fixated on something over the horizon. She ordered me to grab my things in a very assertive, nearly hysterical voice, and yelled at my father to stop taking pictures. She was using the exact same words and expressions in Portuguese that she had used in her dream, a dream she had told me about not too long before our trip to Thailand, a dream she had been having for more than 30 years, a dream that in those 30 years had never changed, a dream that always ended in the same mysterious way, a nightmare that haunted her again for 30 years, a nightmare we were about to experience. I finally turned around to look at what my parents were looking at what everyone on the beach was looking at the thing she was so afraid of, at the thing that haunted her dreams, a tsunami. Yeah. She would have dreams at times. And this was one of them. A very reoccurring dream. And she told me just maybe weeks or days before our trip. And so I had it fresh in my mind, and when everything started happening just like she said it would, it was just like strange.
That was really well written, though. I love how you talk about the innocence of you as a child. You're trying to save these little fish, not even knowing that there's anything going on, and just the normalcy of the day. And, thinking the same thing a child would think, oh, my mom's calling me, oh, now she's upset because I went too far.
Yeah.
The normalcy of how that all changed.
Yeah.
It's very well written.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I'd love for you to share about how your dad taught you physics and that.
Oh, yeah. So my dad, he was a pilot, and he just loved giving me lessons out of the blue. He would use just everyday common objects. Every meal there was a lesson. It was either mathematics or physics. So when I'm underwater, I'm swimming, I can feel all the debris around me, which limits my swimming. And that's one of his many lessons just comes forth. We are inside an airplane, and we're on our seats with our tray tables down. He has a glass of cup on his table, and he's explaining how we are all traveling at the same speed as the airplane, and so this glass of water, appears to be static, but it's not. It's still traveling at the same speed as the airplane, and so are we. But because we're all at the same speed, it just appears like it's not moving. And so you are able to just grab it and move to the side, and it stays there. And so I brought this to my situation. I was traveling with all this debris, and to me they seemed static. So I tested the theory out. I pushed this plank away from me, and I felt it to see if it would stay there, and it did. And then that's how I was able to swim, by using these obstacles, like either pushing them away or pulling them down, almost like a ladder. Because you couldn't just like swim freely, and you couldn't just kick your legs like freely. It was just so much stuff, so much. It's yes.
What was the hardest thing after the tsunami in your life? Because as a mother, we always want to prepare our child to live this life. I know after 13 it's hard. I still have a minor child. So what was the hardest thing for you? Besides, of course, losing your parents.
Yeah, it was, the hardest part was I lost my parents, and they were my home, so I lost my home, and it was not something that I could go back to. And then the current home I was living with and the people I was living with, they were just so different from my parents. Their values differed so much, and just the struggle was just adapting to that. And it was a toxic environment, so I don't think it's not something that you're not doing as a mother. It was just my circumstance of living in a toxic environment. So I don't know how to answer that, but I would say the best thing you can do as a mother is just point your children to God. It's what my mother did for me. Even if she wasn't Christian, she was still very important in pointing me to God. Like, was this impersonal God, a God nonetheless. That helped me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think you need to have your theology all perfect. God will perfect it over time.
I'll share a little story for you.
Okay.
When I was in my early 20s, I met a person who was jumping up in joy of their relationship with God. And I found it a little, I was resistant to get involved in that particular praise of God.
Mm-hmm.
But she planted a seed, and she said, one day you might be in a situation that's beyond your own imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And if that ever happens to you, where you just absolutely don't know the way through, I want you to pull the ripcord. And that is God. I also, too, am a survivor of the tsunami. Kopipi.
Wow.
And on that day, that seed that that person had planted in my 20s came through. And I pulled the ripcord and I said, God, in the next natural disaster, I'm going to be so much more helpful. But God help me, I'm imploding. And grace held my hand through the worst hell imaginable. As I witnessed what you saw, that I made it through.
Yeah, we did.
So congratulations.
Thanks to God. And I've survived on our own. What are the chances?
Well, God sent me.
Yes.
Well, I don't mean to use this as an advertisement, but I do think it's a good segue. There's a theme happening here in our shop. Our next author event is with author Mike Black, who's sitting back there. And he just wrote a book. I want to make sure that I get it right. It's called Rise Above It, The Journey of Overcoming Adversity Toward Resiliency. And so, if Monica's story impacted you, I would really encourage you to come and listen to Mike share. He's going to do a little workshop and on these same themes, right? Because we don't all survive tsunamis, but we all have adversity in our lives that God wants to help us overcome. So Monica has books here that you can purchase and that she will sign. And thank you so much for coming. I'm really just thrilled with how this turned out, and I hope you are too. I hope you feel blessed by it. So thank you again.
I'll answer all your questions. You still have. Okay, goodbye, guys.